What's up, man?
Not a damn thing, sir. How are you?
I am fine. I'm on vacation, but you know what? I'm always holding it down for all you people out there to say George and I sleep on events. I'm doing this shit on vacation. I am doing this shit on vacation.
Ass kisser. I'm doing it for the fan because there's only one fucker who watches this show.
I'm fucking holding it down for the 4.5 fans out there. Anyway, George, the first fight, I know, and a lot of people out there thought
what are we talking about? UFC 161? Is that what we're talking about?
UFC 161.
There
because
you go.
know what, if we say that name too much, we'll fall asleep.
Well,
we will fall asleep. You know it, and I know it. And are you happy that you paid for the event? Just answer that question.
No. But,
yeah, a lot of people.
But
what?
The one thing I will give them is for a fight card that had 5 changes, they did the best they could with what they had, and it's just unfortunate that there were 11 fights total and only 2 got finished.
Yeah, it was just
that's
fucking a night of
painful,
decisions.
and we'll get more into that later. But yeah, that's not good.
Well, let's start out with one of the fights that obviously were one of the 2 that finished, and that was basically Pat Barry. I know he was going up against Shawn Jordan, and I think a lot of people I think we picked Pat Barry, didn't we, George?
Oh yeah, because I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. I'm not real familiar with Shawn Jordan or his body of work. Looking back, he's got a loss to Chech Congo, but that's his only loss in the UFC. I mean, he's got wins now over Pat Barry, Mike Russo, and Ole Thompson. And I have a feeling if he got to fight Chech Congo again, he'd take care of Chich.
Yeah, I think he would too, man. I mean, if you guys aren't familiar with this guy, he was a fullback with LSU in 2007 national championship team, and he
is fucking ox. This man split jerks over 400 pounds. For you who don't know who that is or what that is, go look that up, and then you'll see.
I can't believe he fucking split jerks 400 fucking pounds. But I mean, you know that if you've got that kind of power, and if you're getting with a coach or you get somebody that can tell you how to harness that shit into a good ass hook or a good ass uppercut, which Pat Barry was unfortunately on the end of, you can make people snore all night. And that's what happened.
And I'm going to tell you what, at the end of the fight, I looked at Pat Barry, and I'm looking at him physically, and I'm thinking, you know what? I don't think heavyweight's his place. I think if he wants to stay in the UFC, I mean, he puts on entertaining fights. We all know what we're going to get when we see him fight. I think his home might be at 205.
You know, you're right, man, because if he's at 205, the big thing about that is if he can suck that weight down, is that you're going up against guys that just don't have that kind of fucking power, man. You saw when Chech Congo, he fucked up with Chech Congo got an opening and knocked him out. You saw what happened just with Shawn Jordan. And the fact is that he's going up against guys that pack a lot of power, and you're right. I think he should just drop down to light heavy.
I'm not sure what he weighed in at, but the Wikipedia page has him in at 245, and I'd be surprised if he's that heavy, because he doesn't look that heavy. I mean, he's not one of the bigger heavies, because he's only, where's his height? I know he's not all that tall.
Right. Well, if he's
5'11". So you're telling me 5'11", 245? I mean, that's...
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you what, that's 240. He's got to start sucking some weight. He's going to have to do a Daniel Cormier. He's going to have to suck some weight.
Yeah, I don't know if he could make 205. Maybe he's stuck at heavy, but I don't know. If I were him, I would try. I'd give it the old college try.
Chop off a limb. Remember that one? You said that one at the bar the one time?
Yeah, maybe. I might have said that once to a woman who wouldn't shut the fuck up.
Anyway, speaking of women, there was some females on the card. And
you know what? Kevin and I are accustomed to watching the females bring it and really, save a weak card or put on a show. Yeah. And this just was not. This was not no.
It was not. Alexis Davis defeated Rosi Sexton. And go ahead.
Look, I'm going to tell you right now, there's a stereotype about people across the pond in England not having the best teeth. And I'm going to tell you right now, Rosi Sexton is in desperate need of an oral surgeon. Fuck a dentist. Somebody needs to break that bitch's jaw and fix all her teeth.
It's either a mole calling some girl Mr. Ed. Something you can never keep it about MMA.
I'll say this about anyone. I mean, look, I just got on the Nogueiras last week. This poor woman. I mean, now let's talk about her performance in the octagon. She fought her ass off, and they call her a pioneer of women's MMA in England, and she did. She did the best she could, but she was about half. I mean, she was too short. Reach was too short. She didn't have the power. In fucking what's her name? Alexis Davis just used her size and strength and just muscled this girl around the ring. I mean,
but I'm going to tell you, the bottom line is, do you know who the winner was between these two, right?
Alexis Davis. Yo, why?
No, Ronda Rousey, because they're not even close to her. This is the thing. Both of those girls are considered top 10 in that class, and that's who you're going to go up against Ronda Rousey. I mean, she could be the champion for 800 fucking years.
Right.
You know? So, I mean, when you look at that bout, she's the one that came out the winner.
Now,
it's just nobody in her class.
No,
okay?
it's young. It's the women's have even further to go than MMA in general. So
right. So it was whack. Now, what about your boy Ryan? Say that last name, Himmo?
Yeah.
Hizzo.
Highly. That was just, dude. I'm gonna tell you right now that fight put me on a downward slide.
That's the thing.
My eyelids were struggling. I don't know. Look, I don't know about the rest of the people on the East Coast, what you guys do on your Saturdays, but I'm gonna tell you what, staying up till 10 o'clock and trying to suffer or watch this, it's tough.
It was brutal. I mean, because you had there were so many fights, and a lot of them were going to. I can't remember. I know a lot of them went to decision, and it's much harder on the East Coast doing that. And you know, people, it's just all around. If you looked at anybody that reported on 161, everybody was saying it was a snooze fest. They thought on paper it looked like a snooze fest, and it lived up to its billing. It was a snooze fest. And sometimes there's going to be cards like this, and it's not like we're hating on the cards. It's just a fact. The shit puts you to sleep. You're looking at the inside of your eyelids, as was I, literally.
I hope you weren't, because you were still driving.
You're a bitch, man. Anyway, Jimmo defeated Igor via unanimous decision. I mean, I'd love to sit back and say there was a winner or a loser. Yeah, there was a winner. Jimmo won the fight, but it just wasn't that much impressive that came out of this bout. Unless you can correct me if I'm wrong, George. Out
of the 1, 2, 3, the 3 fights we've watched or talked about, there's only one fighter right now I want to see fight again, and that's Shawn Jordan. Shawn Jordan and Pat Barry. The other 4, I don't want to see either one of those women fight again. Jimmo has been very explosive in his first couple fights, but this fight he wasn't. Igor looked like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He wasn't impressive. So I'm done. I think we should move on to what I consider the upset of the night, but it was also probably the biggest disappointment of the night, for me at least.
It was a big disappointment because, you know what, big country, and he did take this fight on short notice, but the bottom line is if you take a fight on short notice, you got to come prepared. Because people are coming to see you fight. But how long is
short notice? What's short notice to you?
I mean, he took it on a shorter notice than he would have. I think, a month notice?
Is 6 weeks too short? Is 6 weeks too short?
Well, I don't know. I think if you take a fight and it's short notice, if it's 4 weeks, I think you got to be prepared. You got to know that you can be in shape, and that's been the problem for Big Country. I mean, we both are huge fans of him, but I mean, now you're looking at.
Here's my thing. It's not that to me taking a fight on short notice is mean I was sitting on the sideline and I'm training, but not necessarily. He just fought 6 weeks ago.
Right.
So I don't know if they called him at week 3 and said, hey, can you fill in 3 weeks? I don't know if they said, can you fill in 2 weeks? I don't know how much notice he had, but I'm thinking 6 weeks removed from a fight, I might be back, especially since his last fight. You have to know you could fill in because he didn't suffer any damage. He had no medical suspension. And fucking Chech Congo's still not sure where he's at. And I was just, I hate to use the word, but disappointed. I was truly disappointed in Roy Nelson. That man threw 8 or 9 punches as hard as he could, and then his lungs tapped out.
He really did. I mean, and I think it was a huge disappointment for anybody that's a Big Country fan. I mean, I was disappointed in it. And you have to wonder, okay, how much does he let himself get out of shape in between fights? Because like you said, George, he fought just 6 weeks prior. Then on top of that, you got to think, you're going to take this fight on a short notice. I mean, Stipe Miocic is by no means, well, now we can say it's a formidable opponent, but before the fight, no one looked at him as a threat, huh?
Yeah, and this is what I'm gonna stand up for Stipe on this one.
Go ahead.
Stipe on my cock fought an excellent fight. He got in, he hit Roy Nelson, he moved, he didn't stay stationary, he wasn't dumb enough to stand there and let he used his reach, his speed, and his quickness just to get in and get out. He wasn't going to stand there and let Roy Nelson tee off on him, and when Roy Nelson finally did hit him, he didn't have anything on the punches because he was constantly out of his reach.
If Roy Nelson was in any type of condition, he might could have boxed him off or cut off the ring and done something to use his power. I mean, this is the thing. You got to think, as much as a fan I am of Roy Nelson, this is a man who was in his last fight of his UFC contract. So now you're in the process of renegotiating a new contract with the UFC. If you win this fight, you're in a great shape because you rattled off 4 wins in a row. You beat some pretty decent opponents during that run, and now you take a loss to somebody who really most people consider not to be in your league.
You just took all your leverage away. You took all your leverage away.
Yeah, he could be hanging out with fucking Rampage and Bellator. Seriously, that's not a joke.
But you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if he did, because I'm gonna tell you right now what it looks like when these guys go over to Bellator. They're also trying to get into wrestling, which is a little bit more of a steady gig. You know what's coming. You don't have to go to training camp. So I'm gonna tell you right now, if you had a 6-man tag team of Roy Nelson, Rampage Jackson, and King Mo. Dude, those are all big names from MMA, and they're all going to go to Bellator. I don't know if you saw Rampage Jackson's first day in TNA. I'm sorry, they're all going to go to TNA. I mean, that would be kind of neat. But did you see Rampage's attempt to stare down Kurt Angle in TNA?
No,
that Bama needs some help.
That Bama, Rampage.
Yeah, he's got some work to do on the mic. I mean. All he did was literally stare at Kurt Angle. It was like a mute. I'm like, motherfucker, did they chop out your tongue? T. Say again?
I said, don't try to carry Mr. T.
Yeah, Mr. T was not sure. It was bad. It was bad. But I don't blame Rampage. And here's the thing: if I'm Roy Nelson and Dana White wants to continue to pop off at the mouth, like those two really don't get along. They like throw barbs at each other. It might be good for him just to get away. Like take 6 months off if he's in a financial spot to do it, and then decide.
Right. I don't think. Big Country, I don't know. I don't see him. I mean, I know I'm going back to Big Country, but I don't know if he'll be able to sign a. And if he does, it's not going to be a big. It might not be. It's not going to be a lucrative contract. He might want to go to Bellator. Bellator. I don't know what they're paying these guys. You know.
Yeah, now, but see, here's the thing. If you can sign with Bellator and TNA, you can get a steady paycheck and a steady, and Bellator. Right. I mean, well, here's the other thing. Does Bellator even have heavyweights?
I have no fucking idea.
I don't either. I want to say they don't. I think light heavy's as heavy as they go. But I'm going
to tell you what, if enough of these guys from the UFC, like I like Rampage Jackson, I like Big Country. I mean, they're entertaining fighters. They're fun guys to watch. They come to fight usually. I mean, obviously not.
Do you like John
Big
Fitch?
Country. John Fitch is in the World Series of Fighting. That's going to be another video, another time. I don't even know we're going to make a video about that fucking disappointing shit. But let's move on to the main event, everybody, because George has some shit he wants to throw at me. And the main event was Rashad Sugar Evans versus Dan Henderson, who is really, and we said this before in the past, has made himself such a one-dimensional fighter by just trying to fucking crank back that H-bomb. And you saw a fight that he caught Evans in the first round, and it looked like maybe he could put
it was a jab
with a jab, and you're thinking, okay, he did something different. Can he finish off Evans? And he didn't, and he just cocked that arm back, and he sits back. And the thing is, if you don't land that punch, if you're Dan Henderson and you don't land that punch, you're in a very fucked up situation because you're not scoring points. And the other person, especially someone like Evans, who is pretty crafty, quick on his feet, can move in, move out, move laterally, he can score points, and that's exactly what he did. And he got a really good third round, and that third round was so impressive against him and Henderson. I think it gave him the fight. I mean, go ahead.
I'm going to make all my points without actually making a point at all.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get where you're going. I get where you're going too.
This is how I'm going to break it down, because on a previous video we talked about how Dan Henderson feels he's owed a fight with John Jones. So let me just, and this is how I'm going to this is how I'm going to attack this argument. Rashad Evans, is Rashad Evans an elusive fighter?
Yes.
Okay. How did Rashad Evans look against John Jones, being an elusive fighter?
Not good.
Right. Dan Henderson had problems finding Rashad Evans. So therefore, by what was just said, how on God's green earth is Dan Henderson going to keep up for 5 rounds trying to chase John Jones? Because John Jones will pepper the fuck out of Dan Henderson and not get anywhere near John Jones. That man was doggedly tired at the end of 3 rounds. Now, with all that said and all the stuff that I've spewed towards Dan Henderson, I had him winning the fight.
A lot of people had him winning the fight. A lot of people had him.
Because to me, if you have such a dominant first round and the second round is so close, me personally, if I'm judging, I'm kind of giving the second round to the guy who just won the first round.
Yeah, I agree.
That's how I would have scored it. So with that and what Rashad did, and the third wasn't signifying enough. Wasn't enough to give it 10-8, which would have made it a draw. So
I think what happened was in the third round, it's not so much what Rashad did as what Dan Henderson couldn't do that hurt him more. I mean, it wasn't like Rashad. Yeah, he couldn't breathe. He couldn't. And this is the thing. And George and I talked to George about this earlier. This was a main event fight. It wasn't a title fight. Obviously, we know that. But it was a main event fight. And now, from what I thought, all the main event fights were how many rounds, everybody?
Well, now let me help you out with that. You also have, here's the one thing we didn't address and we didn't touch on. You had 5 changes to this fight card. Okay?
Right.
So when Dan Henderson and Rashad Evans signed up to do this, they were never slated to fight for 5 rounds, which I think is complete horseshit. Okay?
Right.
So Dana said, since you guys only signed to fight a 3-round fight, you guys only still have to fight a 3-round fight. I think that's bullshit. If you're a fighter, you should be ready to go 25 minutes regardless of where you're at on the card.
But I do think I like the fact that it was a 3-round fight because I think it kept it more interesting. Because I think if it was a 5-round fight, Dan Henderson would have stood a chance.
Those last 2 rounds, it would have looked like an old-fashioned Donnybrook with those 2 guys leaning on each other, trying to push away, throw 1 or 2 punches. It was sloppy. It would have been real sloppy in that 4th and 5th round.
It would have been really fucked up. So continue on with all the shit you do. Do you have any more stats that you're trying to throw at me?
The other thing that
I was enjoying that shit.
The other thing that tripped me out about this is, and this is for all you hardcore MMA fans who think Kevin and I don't, and I want someone to be completely 100% honest. There were 11 fights on this card, and if you sat there and watched every fight on this card, you only saw 2 get finished. Were you happy with that? That's not truly why anyone tunes in. And to me, look, the time when John Fitch absolutely dominated, was it Maya with his jiu-jitsu? Or no, or was it Eric Silva? I think it was Eric Silva with his jiu-jitsu. Anyway, I like that, but there wasn't any of that on this either. It was just a fucking snooze fest.
Put it this way, people who say, well, I like to see a really good ground game and wrestling, and when you see that kind of stuff in fights, really, then why aren't you guys going to see collegiate wrestling? Because you know what, they can't. Why is wrestling thinking about getting yanked from the Olympics? Because nobody's entertained with that shit. I mean, and this is coming from somebody who wrestled. I mean, people are not paying to see that shit. People want to see action. People want to see people get dropped, knocked out. Even if it's an all-out battle, like when you saw Dan Henderson fight Shogun Rua. It was a fight. I mean, nobody got dropped. It went the distance. But you know what? Everybody loved that fight. Everybody loved seeing Forrest Griffin and the fight of the fucking century, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
Versus Steve Bonner.
Versus Stephen Bonner. Everybody wanted to see that fight, and loved that fight, and there was no knockout. It wasn't a finish.
I just want to know how many of you hardcore so-called super MMA fans really enjoyed this card top to bottom. And I know some of you motherfuckers tuned in from top to bottom. I tuned out, and I'm gonna tell you right now, God bless my DVR, or I never would have seen the Rashad Evans fight. I watched that shit this morning.
I'm going to tell you another thing, too. They lost a lot of last-minute pay-per-views because I'm going to tell you what, if you were watching that shit on FX, the free part, and then you saw the last bout, which was supposed to be the sensational bout between Jake Shields and Tyron Woodley.
What a steaming pile of dog shit that fight was. For all you people who got a fucking rock hard dick and threw on your fucking Tyron Woodley hats because you saw him fight his opening fight in the UFC, welcome to the reason why no one watched that Bama in Strikeforce.
Right.
Dude, he is one of the most athletic, boring people I've ever seen in my entire fucking life, and Jake Shields looks 3 chromosome shorts of being normal. That Bama looks like a fucking retard. His mouth's all open, his ears are out. If that Bama was cockeyed, you'd never want to think that dude could fight.
George,
God bless he has straight eyes. He is horrible to fucking watch.
I will really tell you this. If you were watching that fight on FX and did not fall asleep and missed the whole pay-per-view event, if you were thinking or debating on buying the pay-per-view event, after watching that fight, more than likely you're like, fuck this, I'm done.
Dude, if you were watching that fight with a loaded gun and didn't shoot yourself, that's hats off to you. That shit was stank. That fight was fucking horrendous.
On that note, we want to know your feelings on it because I am on vacation and I need to get the fuck out of Dodge because I know George is hyped the fuck up today, and when he starts cracking on everybody that we're talking about, I know this motherfucker will be in my ear for a good 2 hours. So I'm going to end your comedy show, motherfucker. Anyway. See you, bye. We'll catch you guys next week. Later. Comical, brash, and sometimes politically incorrect. The Uncut Sports Show. Non-traditional sports coverage delivered the way you like it by your uncensored co-hosts, Kevin White and George Bedford.